Good afternoon. Welcome to the show. I'm Melissa Ridge, and we're glad that you could join us as the world's eyes remain on what's happening in the Ukraine. We're reminded of some of the connections that we share with Ukrainian settlers who come to this land. APTN has done tons of stories about the shared love of kookum scarves, for example, those colorful floral head scarves that many of us only learned recently were brought to us as gifts to our ancestors from Ukrainian settlers. Well, I've got another something that you might not have known about either, unless you're living in Edmonton or that area. There was a partnership a couple years ago of Ukrainian dancers and powwow dancers. Yes, in 2018, the Shumka Ukrainian Dancers in Edmonton and Running Thunder Dance, they teamed up to produce an incredible performance called Ancestors and Elders. We'll see some of that and talk to two of the folks that were involved in that production about the friendships that were formed and how that impacts them now with what's happening now overseas. Later in the show, we have some reactions to last week's show about a mother who's battling the child welfare system. And then we're going to get into exploring Indigenous women in street gangs. Very personal stories from life on the streets were made into a new book. We have some of those women writers who are going to be joining us. Let's start with a look behind the scenes at how Ancestors and Elders, that dance I was telling you about, came to be.
The actual process of building this project was bigger than the show itself. I mean, there's a lot of social barriers that get in the way of just creating the work, and we have to take really careful steps to make sure that we're doing it right.
Shumka's done collaborative work before. It's not a strange concept to us. We've had guest artists in tons of shows in the past. I don't think we've collaborated on anything to this extent before, because it's been with everything, from myself and Barry collaborating as co-directors to having multiple visual artists collaborating together, musicians of different backgrounds collaborating together to build the score. It's been a lot of coordination and a ton of work that I did not anticipate.
Here, in the moment when they came for us, over and over and over, forever 5 years old, forever facing years of lashes.
There was a lot of surprises along the way, and I think both for our Indigenous collaborators and for us. And I think the most important sort of surprise for me is that we have such a bond right now, and that's exactly what we want to say in our stories.
We asked our sacred grandmothers and grandfathers to be with us, to guide us through this process. And I asked that when this show ends, that our relationship wouldn't end, that we would still continue to work together in a good way.
get goosebumps every time I see that. I had the chance to sit down with Adrienne Lachance and Darka Tarnowski earlier. So it's been about 3 years since ancestors and elders took the stage in Edmonton. I'm very curious how this all came to be. Thanks, Adrienne and Darka, for joining us. I'll just put it out there to each of you from your own perspective. How did this ever get started in the first place?
Well, Shumka had talked about the concept of doing something about the relationship between the Indigenous community and the Ukrainian settlers that came in the early 1900s. And we thought it was a story that a lot of people didn't know about and realized how important it was to tell. So we decided to work together and find from the Indigenous community who worked with our Ukrainian artists, to put the production together.
Adrienne, how did Running Thunder get involved in it?
So one of my dancers, Lakota Tatusis, performed with the Ukrainian dancers at the Ukrainian village, just east of Edmonton, and that's kind of how the relationship began, because he gave I used to have business cards, and he said, yeah, let's do something, let's create something beautiful. And so that's kind of how it was established. Darka called me and we went and met and began the friendship that we still have today about working together.
Well, I mean, I want to get to that too. You know, that friendship, you guys obviously hundreds of hours were put together when you guys were together on this production to make this happen. As we just saw parts of the production before we started talking to you guys here, just incredible. That would have taken hundreds of hours. So, you know, that relationship, I guess, that was formed there, you know, your reflection of that now, those people who became friends, Adrienne, you see what's happening with their ancestors, their loved ones back home in the Ukraine. You know, how does it impact you?
I mean, I just feel for the people, you know, because of TikTok, we're getting information and stories about their president and what a true warrior he is to stand up and to get into his gear, I guess you would say, to defend his country and his land, which is so inspiring for me to see as someone that you know, wasn't really given that opportunity, and to watch him do that, I think is so courageous on his part. And I definitely feel for the people over there, and definitely sending prayers and good vibes that they can find peace and resolution to this.
Yeah. Darka, it's got to be particularly rough for people like yourself, you know, settlers to Canada. You've got loved ones still back home in the Ukraine. You know, how are you coping with what's happening over there? What are you hearing? How many family members do you have still over there?
I have about 30 family members, so first cousins, aunts and uncles, and then extended family. We keep in touch with them through Facebook Messenger and try to make sure we hear from them at least once a day. They're all in the Lviv area, so thus far they're safe, but life is very difficult for them. We also, in Shumka, have worked a lot with artists in Kiev, Ukrainian dancers, classical dancers, musicians, composers. And we've also been trying to stay in touch with all of them to see if we can help to just keep their spirits up, to let them know that we're praying for them and that Canada is praying for them.
Adrienne, I'm curious to know, you know, your neck of the woods out by Edmonton, do First Nations in that area have a different relationship with Ukrainian settlers compared to others who have settled in the region?
You know, I think we have a good relationship with them. Because as we all know, they make the best pierogies. I'm just kidding. But, yeah,
there's something to be said for a kinship that you feel with people who bring you good food too, right? The pierogies, the cabbage rolls.
I was once told by an elder, says that the best way to a Cree man's heart is through his stomach. Feed him good and he'll always respect you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's for sure. You know, I do think that you know, this production that we said, like, last time anybody saw it would have been in the Edmonton region about 3 years ago. Certainly there might be a new appetite for this now, and certainly in a broader base than just around the Edmonton area. You know, where would people be able to see ancestors and elders, the production itself, and the behind the scenes?
We have both of the films available on YouTube. So if people go to Tell Us Story Hive, you can access it there on their YouTube channels, because they were a supporter of the project. As well, if you look on Shumka's YouTube page, both the production film and the documentary called Dancing on Eggshells are there. Metro Cinema in Edmonton premiered the films, and they are looking at playing them again at the end of March as a fundraiser for humanitarian aid in Ukraine. So we're hoping that comes together, and we think that people, like you said, have a renewed interest in this relationship. We've seen so much support from the community, from the friends that we worked with, the ancestors, elders, but also others, and it means a lot to us.
Yeah, well, our hearts are certainly with you. Adrian, what about Running Thunder? What are you guys up to these days? I guess COVID would have put a damper on live performances and whatnot, but what are you guys up to these days, and can we look forward to another collaboration between Shumka or anybody and Running Thunder? Because I mean, that production was so incredible. I love seeing that, the sort of mix of cultures. If you can share with us what's on tap.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. We're always open to collaborating and renewing that friendship with the Shumka Ukrainian dancers. My kids always ask about, Dad, when are we gonna dance with them again? I mean, they're so excited. I mean, my children just became fond of the high energy, the collaboration with them. It's definitely had a good impact on my children's life and my life. So I'm definitely open. You know, the sooner the better, I think, would be now's the time. You know, now's the time is to bring this awareness and begin to embrace peace and kindness and love and compassion back to the forefront, because for what's going on in this world, it's like we don't understand love for what it is. It's a gift from the Creator. So we need as human beings to honor those teachings that have been handed down from our grandparents, you know, to love one another, to help one another, to support one another. I think now is the time. So I'd definitely be open to doing something again in the near future with Shumka and any other else that wants to come on board and to create something beautiful.
Adrian, the world needs more people like you, that is for sure. Thank you guys both for taking the time to join us today. I certainly hope people tune in to see this magnificent piece of work that you guys did a few years ago, because it's certainly relevant now. Thank you guys both.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Hi, have a good day.
Really is a great looking show, so we want to share another clip with you.
This land is all winter. All winter. All winter. This land is all wind. This land is all wind. It will freeze our hearts unless we can find medicine. Oh Lord, are we abandoned? Sustain us in this winter. Show me this medicine. Reveal that this place, too, holds the signature of your loving hand.
Well, as the conflict wages on in Ukraine, those with ties overseas can only watch in horror from afar, including a Northern Ontario lawyer who is of Ukrainian and Ojibwe heritage. Don Rusnak is a former Liberal MP for Thunder Bay Rainy River and a lawyer working from the Fort William First Nation. I got to talk with him last week about this conflict and meeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Don, thanks so much for joining us. How are you and your family doing through all of this? What's happening in the Ukraine?
It's difficult to see, especially the families and the children being displaced. I think of what my ancestors went through. On my father's side, of course, I'm half Anishinaabe and half Ukrainian, and my ancestors, my great grandparents came from Ukraine in the early 1900s and settled in Winnipeg, and I imagine what they went through, and I just see I see the pictures of people going through horrible things and trying to move with their families. And my heart just breaks, and I couldn't imagine doing that with my family, having to be forced out of our communities, much like our Indigenous people were moved around a long time ago. So it's just absolutely heartbreaking. Are you still in touch with family in Ukraine? So it was funny. I spoke to my dad and my grandmother, who's passed away quite a while ago, was there in the 70s. And I asked him if he was in touch with anyone she made contact with, and he said no. He wished he had been, and we do still have family there in Ukraine, and second cousins and other family members. And I know I was just in Ottawa earlier this week, and I spoke with our current member of parliament, where for the riding I represented, Thunder Bay Rainy River, who also has Ukrainian descent. He asked if our family would be consider taking in refugees or supporting refugees, and we said absolutely. Yeah. You actually met President Zelensky at an event in Toronto recently. Can you share with us what that was about? What did you think of him then? Your thoughts on his leadership now? Well, it wasn't recently. It was when he was first elected as president of Ukraine. He does have an amazing presence, and just seeing the videos of him of the last 2 weeks have been absolutely inspiring and amazing. He's certainly inspired a lot of people around the world, and is very inspiring to the people of Ukraine. So he is certainly a force and a presence. Well, certainly, I love I don't need a ride, I need ammo, I don't need a lift. I love that quote. You were a Liberal MP yourself from 2015 to 2019. I'm curious your thoughts on what the Liberal government has promised to do to help versus what you think that Canada should be doing to help. Yeah, and as part of the Liberal government, I sat on as a director of the Canadian-Ukrainian Friendship Group, and we lobbied our government at the time and worked with our government. Minister Freeland, who had a different role at the time, but was still supportive of Ukraine and sending support, has been remarkable. In the last little while. I know requests were made earlier for defensive arms. They weren't met until recently, but as I mentioned before, I was in Ottawa earlier this week, and I happened to run into Minister Freeland. I thanked her for what she did and what she has been doing in terms of getting our whole government to support the people of Ukraine in terms of economic aid, humanitarian aid, and defensive aid. They need it because it's just I have no ill will against the Russian people, but their leader right now in President Putin is just pure evil, and he needs to be stopped. If someone stopped Hitler way back when, you think about how many lives would have been saved. So it's so sad, and just any support that anyone can offer in terms of, especially that humanitarian aid and supporting the refugees, I just think is so important. Yeah.
Well, our thoughts are with your family over there, with you as you watch from afar. It's got to be frustrating. We thank you for taking the time out of your day today to come and chat with us.
Thank you, Melissa. I appreciate it.
It's nice to talk to him last week. Well, let's go now to social media with our social media editor, Jesse Andrushko, to hear what you're saying about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and showing support with kookum scarves.
Thanks, Melissa. Kookum scarves have become a trend on social media. The floral scarves worn by many kookums are linked to early Ukrainian settlers who traded wares with First Nations women. Now people are sharing their pictures of their kookum scarves to show support for Ukraine. Here's a look at just a few. First, from Eleanor. She shared a picture of herself and her sister Judy wearing their kookum scarves to show solidarity. From Brenda. She says, wearing my babushka scarf, also known as my kookum scarf, for the people of Ukraine. I'm thinking and praying of you all. From Tina, I wear my kookum scarf, proud and stand with Ukraine. From B, wearing my Masani scarf to represent Ukraine and the recent awful events that have been happening. My prayers and heart goes out to all the families that lost their homes and loved ones. Just remember, your Indigenous brothers and sisters are keeping you in our prayers. Lastly, from Claire, I wear my kookum Masani scarves in solidarity with Ukraine. Prayers for safety and peace. Great stuff. Thank you to everyone for sharing. Keep posting your kookum scarf pictures. If you would like to add your pictures, if you want to send your pictures to us or join the conversation, here's how. Join our conversation now. Call in toll free at 1-877-647-2786. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus. And send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
I love our audience, and I thank you for sharing that. I have to tell you about this other thing here too. Two youth, a 15-year-old Shawana Ray and her 10-year-old brother Jacob Green. They're from Treaty 9 territory. They made these beautiful Ukraine flag pins to help raise money for the people of Ukraine. So far, they've donated $135. That's to relief efforts there. You should check out Ray Sisters on Facebook to see more of the creations that Shawana and Ari, that's her sister, they sometimes make, and their little brother too. Okay, so we have to take a quick break. Still ahead, Indigenous women in street gangs. We talked to some who put pen to paper to tell their very personal stories as part of a new book. Stay with us. Hey, hello. Is this Chantel and Bev? Or Chantel and or Bev? Chantel or Bev, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Welcome back. Last week we talked to a mother who is fighting the child welfare system for the return of her 4 kids, and she's fearful that they may take her 5th when that child is born later this year. Let's take a look at that interview from last week.
The nurse came into my room and she said that there would be, that she needed to take my baby to see the pediatrician. And I said to her, do you need me to come with you? And she said, no, that's okay. I'll be right back with him. You can just lie down and sleep. So I laid back down in the bed, and I wasn't asleep yet. I could see footprints beneath the door frame, and many of them, not just one. So I knew something was happening, and I could just feel that.
Did you know what a birth alert was at this point?
No.
Like nobody, it wasn't a term that you knew. I mean, you know now that there had been a birth alert put on you. And that's why you were treated like you were at the hospital.
Yeah.
Did they take your baby?
Yes, the nurse took my baby.
That was the last time you saw your son at that point. He was a couple hours old.
The nurse at the hospital.
So you guys go home empty-handed. How long did you have to wait to get your son back?
I think it was about 6 weeks.
That mom is now expecting her 5th child. She worries that child will be gone, will be taken too. She also has 5 lawsuits currently in the works, various stages of development, so we're going to keep following that. We had a heartfelt response from you, our viewers, about that mom that we had on last week. So many Indigenous families are affected by the child welfare system, of course. Here's Jesse Andrushko again with some of the comments that you made to us on social media.
Thanks, Melissa. Last week's episode certainly resonated with many viewers. Here's some of what was shared. First from Ron on Twitter. What needs to be done is what's best for children, period. I don't think someone who's had kids taken is the most objective to what needs to be done. On Facebook, Anna said, Manitoba truly has one of the most horrendous child protective services in the country. They gotta have the highest death and sexual abuse rates in the country. Bia said, government is too fond of getting in the parenting business. From Clayton, some social workers of Manitoba really hurt families more than they help. They need to be held accountable. Lillian commented, apprehension of Indigenous children is genocide, the same as residential school. Rainville said, we need to take over the child care system. It has to evolve. Kristen on Twitter said, it's a bureaucracy first, which serves itself above everything. In too many cases, it punishes families in poverty and funds child removal rather than funding families at the expense of the emotional well-being of children. Lastly, from Nadia, first thing you have to do is take away the funding incentives. Children's Aid gets cash for every kid they grab, so that incentivizes them to grabbing more children. Follow the money. Thank you to everyone for sharing their opinions. You can hear that full interview from last week's InFocus as a podcast. Listen and subscribe at aptnnews.ca/podcast. If you would like to add your opinion to our conversation, here's how. Join our conversation now. Send your thoughts to InFocus at aptn.ca, like us on Facebook on our APTN News page, and follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus.
Thanks for that, Jesse. There's a new book out and we want to share it with you, Indigenous Women and Street Gangs, Survivance Narratives. How the book came to be, 2 women who helped write the book. They're here to discuss too. And here with me in studio is Robert Henry. He helped bring this whole thing to life. And then Bev, and here, I'll show you the book. I actually have it right here just so you can see. We have Bev and Chantel. We're going to be joining us a little bit later here. So I want to thank you for coming on here to talk about this book. I was super excited to read it. I had it sitting on my desk. A whole bunch of other people here also were like, hurry up and read it because they wanted to read it. I don't think I was prepared for just what was in there, like how raw and real these stories are in here. It wasn't somebody else, it's not you telling these people's stories, it's them telling these stories. You know, you describe yourself as a white-coated heterosexual male, you know, you're Métis, of course, but, you know, you've never been involved in gang life. How do you get into this? How does this all start?
So the whole reason why I got into understanding street gangs and street gangs lifestyles started about 20 years ago. I was an educational assistant in Queen Mary Community School in Prince Albert, and we were starting to see at this time the term gang come into the school and everything else. And the teachers started to get a little bit worried, and then they brought in police officers to talk about the issues that they were seeing. And as the police were talking, they were saying these things, and they were very generic. Kids wearing backwards hats, living in a certain area, poverty, Indigenous. And so I kept asking the question, well, why is this? Why are we focusing on these kids? Because of the way they look, and not the kids up on the hill or in another area who were lived in more affluent neighborhoods and who didn't look Indigenous, but were doing the same behaviors or dressing the same.
Gotcha.
So that's where it all kind of started to stem from. And so from there, I just started to look at how do schools identify gang, how do they deal with gangs within the schools, and what are the policies that they're putting in, and then that led to my master's work, looking at how do we define street gangs in the prairies. And so that's where I started to interview police officers, corrections workers, community-based organizations, and it seemed that nobody had a definition. I just kept going around in a circle. But it was while doing this research that I started to work with the group Straight Up in Saskatoon. So I met them, started to build a relationship with them on what they were doing, and they slowly over time.
Tell people who might not know what's Straight Up, what do they do?
So Straight Up is a community-based organization that works with individuals where they're at to get out of the street lifestyle, primarily working with street gang members. And so it started around 1998 with Father Andre within the prison system, where a couple of gang members came to him and said, help us get out. And so he didn't know what to do because there was no programming at that time.
Right.
So we slowly working on that to get them out. And now Straight Up is does a lot of provincial and is broad, works with people where they're at in the justice system. And so this is where I met the women.
I was going to say, so they connected you with the women who...
Yep. So where this all came from was when I was doing my master's, I saw this book called It's All Good. And it was about a photo voice book in the Bronx in New York, and I started to read it, and it was photographs, but it was the narratives of the people, and I was like, this is really cool. Like, we don't see anything like this in Canada. A lot of the research with Indigenous peoples is primarily on or autoethnographies, but never this sort of other sort of space. So I brought it to Straight Up, and I said, I'd like to do this with the men, to understand what is the role of masculinity within the street gang, and how do we understand this? And so this is where we started to develop a photo voice, a community engaged photo voice project. So that's where the first book came in, called Brighter Days Ahead. And then so we created that book, and all the proceeds go back to Straight Up from that book. But while we were doing it, some of the women came up and said, well, why is it always men?
Yeah, totally.
So, and I said, just let me finish this, and then we can work on it and try and make it better. And hopefully we can do a project with you afterwards. And so that slowly started to move forward to this, the collection here, which about 2016 we started to collect the stories and work together and slowly do this.
That was going to be my next question. What was the timeline? So 2016, this came out late 2021?
Yeah. So when we read these stories, we have to remember that when we did this was 5 years ago. So the women have really, their lives have changed, or lots have happened since then. And it's a snapshot of how their life was up until that point. Not up until 2021, but up until then, because the process was about doing interviews, looking at how do we get the proper photographs to use, and then going back to them every round on how do we make the story, making sure that the story is theirs, and making sure that when it went back to them, they signed off. And so there are times where it was like, okay, this is in the wrong space because of our interviews, put it over here. So I would work with them and put it back into those. And then the other reason why it took a little bit longer is that it went through a peer review process. So a book like this has never really gone through a peer review process at the university level. And in doing so, I just wanted to see, can we actually start putting these narratives through a peer review process at the university to be validated that this is, so we can utilize it within our work. And it came back and said, yeah, you just have to include the literature. So that's where that introduction chapter started to come from.
That's wild. Well, we have one of the authors who is joining us now. Chantel, can you hear me?
No, that's Bev.
Oh, that's Bev.
I can hear you.
Chantel. That was
Yes.
Bev can hear. There you are. Hi, Chantal.
I'm here.
Nice to
Sorry, I'm
to
traveling
kind of meet
back
you.
from Prince Albert.
Absolutely no problem. You know,
Okay.
I have to say, your story, reading this, like I felt heartbroken, gut wrenched. You know, kind of mortified that anybody who lives in this country, really anywhere, any human, you would never want to hear that any human would go through this, and that it's happened. You know, it's not historic. It's not a long time ago. This is like kind of my generation. Why would you want to even like something this personal? Why would you even want to put it to pen to paper and put it in a book?
I'm going to be 100% honest with you. At the time, it was my ego that agreed to do it. It was ego.
I love that's whatever the driver, I guess, was. I love, because I think there's so much value in you sharing your story. You know, for
if I
other
was
people
to do it again today, it would be completely different. When it was published and I had it in my hands, there was a lot of excitement, feelings that weren't like, this is surreal. And then there was shame, regret, guilt. I shouldn't have done it. I want to take back every copy printed. But there's a lesson for me in it. And if it's me sharing my story saves one woman and gives her a voice, then my job is done, right?
Yeah. Would you be okay if I read a portion of it?
Sure.
For our audience here. This is Chantal here. I'm still learning. I think this is you. Yeah. I'm still learning, and it's the most amazing feeling in the world. I realize what I do with my grandkids to what I did or didn't do with my own kids. It's just, I shipped my kids off to my mom's. I didn't know. And for me now, there are so many firsts that I never did with my own children. Then skipping down a little bit, I incorporate in a good way of life and show them positive things. If there's negative things that come up, it's about teaching them that there's a way to get through it. And when I'm with my kids and grandkids, if I'm having trouble, I put myself in a position of being an elder and thinking, what would the elder say to me? That would teach me. And that's how I guide my kids and my grandkids today. I mean, that hits you right in the gut. So, you know, what do your kids and your grandkids think about being in this book? What do they think of your involvement in what you write?
I don't believe that my grandkids even know. I've had more grandkids since this book. And I didn't stay on the path that you just read about. I strayed from that path, and I ended up back and I ended up back in the street criminal gang lifestyle, and I ended up back in prison, right? So, like Bobby said, there's a lot of growth in the 5 years that we started this. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of truths that need to be told. But yeah, I didn't, when that was written, I didn't stay on that good path. I didn't continue walking that good life I was living. I went back to the lifestyle. So I had to, from what you read to now, I had to reconnect with my kids. I had to reconnect with my grandkids. You know, it's a harsh reality when you're living that life that could happen, right? Yeah. And now I honor what you just read every day, and I teach my kids in a good way and my grandkids in a good way. And to see the change in them and to see the change in my own children is just super amazing, right?
Well, so. And you've gone through a lot too, you know, as a mom, you know, reading about your childhood that's in here. You know, you have your own kids. You wrote that your own daughter was stabbed 9 times. You've got grandkids now. You know, how do you look at your life? You look what's happened to your daughter. I'm just curious how you feel now, looking at like, what if that what if life was like that for them? Like, how do you?
So my reality is that life was like that for my daughter. As my journey continued beyond this book, me and my daughter ended up being cellmates at one point. in the past 5 years, right? So it's making those changes in your life and moving forward in a good way and role modeling that to your own children, your grandchildren, but the community that you're a part of. And that's how change happens, right?
Yeah. I have a bunch more questions for you, and we're going to be joined by another author of the book. Bev is going to join us here, but we have to take one more break here quickly. Stay with us. We're going to come right back and keep talking about this with our powerful, fascinating women authors. Welcome back. We are talking about a new book, Indigenous Women and Street Gangs, a Survivance Narrative. It's written in first person by 6 women who've lived it. Robert Henry is here in studio. He was instrumental in this book all coming together. And by Zoom, we've got 2 of the authors, Bev and Chantel. We were speaking with Chantel before the break. I'm going to pick up with her after I say, hi, Bev, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so thankful that you could join us too here. This book, I was saying to Bobby before the break here, I wasn't prepared for what I was picking up when I started reading this book, and it's certainly, like, to say it's impactful, I think is a giant understatement. Bev, you wrote about womanizing dad, your mom splitting when you were a toddler, stepdad and mom were hardworking but hard drinking alcoholics, working all day, drinking all night. You grew up in kind of an abusive and unpredictable home. Are you okay with me sharing a portion of your story here?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So this is being thrown off the second floor balcony of your childhood apartment by your stepdad at the time you were 13 after being caught smoking a cigarette, and your mom didn't help as this was all happening. You write, that was the last day I ever lived at home. That was my last memory with them. That was my whole childhood, you know, just nothing good at all. So when that happened and they wouldn't let me back in, they wouldn't answer the buzzer, they wouldn't give me any of my clothes. So I left and I walked to my older sister's house. I moved in with her and started being a babysitter. She had parties all the time at her house, and I got to meet a lot of people. On my 14th birthday, my sister and her friends took me to the bar that they worked at, and that's when I met one of the founding members of the gang I would later become connected to. I was completely hammered, and all of a sudden I see this native guy walking in. He had this braid in his hair. He was a bigger, kind of puffed up guy with a whole bunch of guys around him. You know, for me, how my self-esteem and everything was taken away, I was drawn to him. You know, if not for that incident at home and everything that led up to that, do you think that this moment that we just read would have ever happened?
You know, I could try to imagine or pretend a whole different childhood. I, you know, wasted many nights imagining a different life. I think any moment in my childhood, if it would have been different, probably could have altered my whole path in life. But that's my reality. It was all chaos and trauma.
Chantal, I wanted to, we were talking to you before the break here. Sorry, I don't have COVID. I'm just all scratchy throated now. One thing I loved that you had written, Chantal, was that you said, you know, don't ever feel sorry for me. So I'm losing my voice entirely here now. No, it's okay. Don't ever feel sorry for me. You know, I've made some bad choices and some mistakes, but if I want help, I will ask for it. And I love that about you. You still live by that?
I do live by that. And I learned how to ask for help even more now than back then, right? I have this amazing support network across Canada, Canada-wide. And I know who to go to for certain things, right? I can't rely just on one person for everything I need help for. So, and don't feel sorry for me. I believe that everything I've been through has shaped me into the woman I am today. And I wouldn't have it any other way. You know, people ask me, if you could change your life and go back, what would it be? And I say absolutely nothing. I believe Creator put all these experiences in my life for a reason. And now I use my voice to help others.
Well, we're glad you do. And I appreciate too, like that notion of, if you take away any of the hardship, any of the bad stuff, then you wouldn't be where you are today. So I do appreciate that. How was it for you, Robert, listening to these stories, like as these stories are coming in, reading all, and we've got two of the authors on here now, but like all of them that were involved in this have similar, like powerful, hard to read stories. How were you taking it all in? What were you thinking at the time?
Well, I think part of it is that I knew some of the women through the work at Straight Up, and Bev met at the project. It was the first day she just came on campus. She just had her new baby with them, and that's how we met. But listening to their stories and everything else, I think it was listening to them always say at the end of every interview and every time we were talking was, don't ever feel sorry for me. Learn from what I'm saying, and we want you to tell other people on what it is so other people don't get caught up in the same stuff. Or that when we look at social workers and probation officers and police officers, they can actually begin to see our life, and they're not treating us as just as a gang member. They're seeing that we're women, we're individuals who have had difficult lives, and we need support, not telling us how to do things, but support us on trying to get there in a good way.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of it is reading these and understanding that this is just a lived reality, and I don't think we should be hiding behind it as much as we try to here in Canada. And that just outside your studios, we're seeing the same narratives happening with other individuals and so forth. But again, it's for the women who were who wanted to put themselves in this book. Like it takes a lot of courage. And I try and tell people that when they're reading this, I was saying, are you willing to talk about some of the darkest times of your life and let other people read and learn from them?
Right. That's the thing. Going through it is one thing, but to then share it with everybody, strangers, and you know, that's a different level of ballsy.
Well, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. And so the strength of the women to be able to do that is amazing. And the other thing, when we were putting the book together and everything else, one of the biggest things that we talked about was, what do we do if it actually makes any money? And so this is where the women decided that all the proceeds from the book go back to them to decide how they want to see it go back into support programming other women who are incarcerated or living the street lifestyle. So this is where the proceeds of the book go to.
That's perfect. That was one of my questions for you too. Bev, I asked Chantel, but I haven't asked you, why did you even want to, what would make you want to share, you know, this very personal story with the public?
When I met with Bobby, I was most recently let out of the federal incarceration. So I had done 3.5 years of a 5-year sentence. And when I went into there, I was broken, right? And I just didn't even know kind of where to start. But then I started realizing that there was a lot of just, I don't know how to say it. Like, there was just a lot of people did not see me for who I was. It was a person who was on paper. People in authorities and systems didn't want to actually know the real me. It was just, I was bad. I was a manipulator. I was a thief. I was a gang member. I remember working with some elders and listening and finally understanding what it meant to heal, and what, you know, finally knowing that love wasn't what love was that I knew of to be. And so I just knew that I was given an opportunity to find my voice. And that's a strength of mine. A lot of folks may not have that yet, but when I heard that was going on and I wanted to be a part of it, it was because I can remember nights where I felt so alone in those jail cells. I was alone. I didn't have my kids. I had no family. Any of the gang members I had, they were all either incarcerated or doing their thing. I was forgotten. And I didn't want folks to, or community and society, actually, no, I take that back. I didn't want other women involved in the street gangs or the lifestyles to feel that they were alone and they were the only ones feeling that, and that there was a way out. There was a good way to, you know, heal. And we didn't deserve that life. Like, even though you are so beaten down and you're stuck and you just can't find that you're worthy of a good life, that's BS. And it took me a long time to find that. And when I found that I had a voice to share and that my story may help other women and youth, men, whoever, you know, plant that seed to be like, hey, you know what, maybe one day I can make that choice. You know, I'm going to do it. I just wanted to, you know, share and be like, this happens. This is our reality. This isn't just movies and books. We're not making this shit up. Pardon my language. This is our reality. And, you know, and so when you're sitting across those tables in the institutions, the social workers, childcare workers, all those people, and they're only seeing who you are on paper, that has to be broken. Like, we can't have that stereotype. We need to break that down.
Well, we certainly see too that, you know, this is, and it's all of the professions that you mentioned that are kind of part of just keeping this going. I know you had I think it was you, Bev, that had said that you were put into a foster home, and people seemed to think like this was going to be a solution. You're like, I just learned new stuff, right? Like this,
yeah,
the child
absolutely.
welfare system is integral to what you guys went through and perpetuating it for a whole other generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you go into a system where it's a money maker for, you know, folks, or we're just we keep the industry going. If we don't have foster kids, we don't have foster parents, we don't have government jobs. It's an industry. And unfortunately, you know, I'm sitting in university right now. I'm doing my Indigenous social work. In one of the classes just this morning, we had an elder talking about that incarceration, the justice, you know, childcare, foster care. I heard just before this, they were talking about, you know, the birth alerts. It's all an industry.
Yeah,
right.
It's
job
a pipeline.
security.
One feeds into the other, that feeds into the other, that feeds into the other. Chantel, we just heard that, you know, Bev's in school. She's doing well. What are you up to? Very quickly, we got like 1 minute left. How are you doing now, Chantel?
I am a lived experience mentor at Straight Up now.
Oh, so this is where you'd met. This is incredible. Well,
yeah, use my voice to advocate for others and use my street experience and my life experience to help others walk in a good way.
Well,
and yeah, quickly too, I'm going to add to that. Like, I'm connected back with my culture and my roots, and I just accepted a system support navigator through Métis Nation, Saskatchewan, getting back, helping my people, groundwork, you know, advocating. So.
We are thankful that you guys could join us today to share your story and that you were doing this work at the grassroots level. Thanks to you too, Bobby. I can't imagine better people who would be there to help people who might not have to go through it or who are trying to get out of it. We are all out of time, but I really do strongly recommend you pick up this book, Indigenous Women and Street Gangs. Thanks to all of our guests for joining us today too. You can share this show with anybody who missed it. Download it as a podcast, aptnnews.ca/podcast. All of our episodes are there. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks so much for being here. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you next week.